seconded. If we could have a vote by name, please.
Mrs. Collier,
Certified.
Mr. Myers,
I certify.
Mr. Sheets,
I certify.
Mr. Wingate,
I certify.
Mrs. Allen.
I certify.
The next thing on our agenda, two things, is the pledge and the moment of silence. We hope you'll join us for the pledge. And when we sit down, we will do a moment of silence. And I would ask all of you to please keep in mind what is going on at UVA right now and keep everyone involved in your thoughts, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll be seated for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. The next thing falls under action, if necessary, on matters that were discussed during the closed meeting. And the first one has to do with personnel matters. The recommended action is to approve the personnel matters and addendum for November the 14th, 2022, to include appointments, resignations, substitute appointments, substitute reappointments, coaching stipends, and sponsor stipends as presented. Could I have a motion, please?
I so move.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the personnel matters for November the 14th, 2022. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. The very next thing that we do is to approve the consent agenda. Could I have a motion that we approve the consent agenda for November the 14th, 2022 as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented, which does contain the school board meeting minutes dated October the 10th, 2022, as well as claims for operating expenses, food services, CIP, supplemental appropriation expenses, and expenditure report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Our next section is the one that we look forward to every month, and it has to do with recognitions. And the first one is a recognition of the Senior of the Month.
As Ms. Wenham comes forward, we just want to remind everyone that the Senior of the Month program showcases a graduating senior, one each month during the school year, and recognizes them for their academics, their extracurricular activities, and their service to others. Each Senior of the Month is not only recognized at a school board meeting, but they're also invited back to come to a dinner at the end of the year where they will get to recognize an educator that had an impact on their education while in Madison County Public Schools. So they have a chance to give back at the end of the year. Ms. Wenham?
Thank you. Could I ask Abby Johnson to join me up here at the front, please? As she's coming up, I'm just going to make a little plug for Friday night. We have our Powder Puff football game, and Abby's coming from practice from that right now. So juniors versus seniors will participate Friday night at 6:30. You all are welcome and encouraged to attend. It helps us raise money for prom, and it was started many, many years ago. And I just wanted to share that we continue that tradition here. So, hi. Good evening. May I have a moment to introduce you to Abby Johnson, an MCHS senior and Blue Ridge Virtual Governor School student who has fully immersed herself in the high school experience and provided service and leadership to a large number of her peers and the Madison community. Aside from the typical demands of being a high school senior and Governor School student, Abby also serves and participates with the following in-school activities and organizations: our Marching Mountaineers, the Blue Ridge Virtual Governor School Leadership Council, the MCHS Student Principals Cabinet. She's our senior class vice president and the Future Farmers of America president. Abby was elected by the MCHS student body as the 2022 Homecoming Queen and also holds another title of royalty as Virginia Hereford Queen. How do you say that? Hereford. I've been practicing how to say that, so I'm so sorry. This is all recorded. To Madison County, I do not know how to say that, but I just learned something. Abby is also a working student outside of school hours to her family's farm business, Johnson Cattle Company. Her work ethic is never in question, and she's always finding ways to make things better for other people. For example, during the spring of 2020, my first year as principal of MCHS, as we all know, schools were shut down due to the coronavirus, and I only had a semester to begin to know the student body. Abby was one of the very first students at that time who I met, and I've been able to be her principal since that day. Within a little over a week of being closed, an assortment of masks were delivered to the front office because we all were still working there, and there's this little assortment of homemade masks. Well, these masks had all been handmade by Abby, and her mom bought them into the school. So in a time that was unfamiliar and uncomfortable for many people, she found a way to serve and make things better for others. Abby also has completed many hours of community service independently and in conjunction with 4-H, where she received the Virginia 4-H All-Star Award this year. And she continues to be a vested member of the organization who provides leadership and mentorship to younger members and same-age peers. So Abby was selected for this month's recognition, not just because of all these wonderful contributions and accomplishment, but because she has a presence about her that makes everyone feel valued and cared for, and she has an ambition for success and service to others. This year, she has been an integral component of rejuvenating our FFA co-curricular organization and led the efforts for the first FFA Harvest Festival, an FFA fundraiser which was a delight for adults, children, and families to attend. She is planning to attend a 4-year university after high school graduation as a first-generation college student studying a field within agriculture. Abby, thank you for being exactly who you are and for loving our school and our community.
Congratulations, Abby. If you'll stop for just a second, we did want to make some comments, or I did. All of the wonderful things that I heard about you, Abby, don't surprise me one little bit, because you were like that when you were in elementary school, and I'm just glad to hear that you have continued to participate and do the right thing for the right reasons, and I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more things about you, because you're well-deserved in all the recognition that you have been given. Anybody else want to say anything to Abby?
I just have to say that I've known Abby since she was born.
Now you got me beat there.
Yep. I have known her since she was born, and she knows how I feel about her. Love ya.
Yeah, thank you. The next recognition that we have is for one of our employees. So the employee of the month will be presented now by
Mr. Coiner is coming forward. Our employee of the month is from the primary school.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you again. I am pleased to announce this evening that Stephanie Gerard has been selected as Madison County Public Schools Employee of the Month for the month of November 2022. Stephanie has been an instructional assistant in special education at Madison Primary School for a number of years now, and I can't think of anyone more worthy of this recognition. Over the years, Stephanie has served the varied needs of many children, demonstrating not only the breadth of her talent, but her commitment to our children as well. She's offered her services to support transportation needs, worked with our school summer school program, and is currently directing one of our after-school enrichment classes. In addition to her ongoing support of our MPS students, Stephanie is currently pursuing her certification to become a special education teacher. The level of commitment to children that Stephanie demonstrates on a daily basis is more than admirable, and I'm so pleased to be able to show her our appreciation this evening. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for everything you do for us at MPS, but especially for loving and growing our little Mountaineers.
Stephanie, on behalf of the board, congratulations and thank you for everything that you do for our littlest ones. I know they are so funny and so precious, and we appreciate the time and the effort that you put in to make every day a very special day for them. So thank you.
And I think I'm just going to stick around for a moment longer because we have a little bit more to share with you this evening. We appreciate the opportunity for being able to share this with you tonight. We have added a new outdoor learning space at the school. We have been talking about this space for, I would say, close to a year, through the school year last year, and then towards the end of the year, we came across some opportunities with some folks that gave us the funding and some other support to make this area possible. But we have Kim Dodson here with us tonight. She is one of our first grade teachers. Come forward at this time. She's going to share the PowerPoint with you. But first grade was really the push behind this. They were the ones that called me to a meeting at their grade level and pitched this idea to me. And I think I might have surprised them by kind of jumping on board with it. Pleasantly surprised. And they've done so much work with it. And this first grade group and Ms. Dodson in particular deserve a lot of the credit. So I present Ms. Dodson.
I do have to say that this project turned out, it came from this idea that Jarrett Caldwell and I wanted to have a place to have our chickens and our ducks and, possibly a cow. And Mike kind of like toned us down and gave us a more workable idea. So, but we're still have our fingers crossed for our space. It's such a great program to be able to put agriculture into our kids' hands. A lot of these kids don't really understand that the milk that we drink, the produce that we grow, can come right from our own community. So, and I put this PowerPoint together. It's definitely by a first grade teacher. It's nothing professional. So this is a great space. Grumman Parker Architects had a Green Apple Day of Service where they provided some of their time to come. And they made a great donation. And so we were able to install a greenhouse and so far 2 raised beds. We had already purchased the composter and the rain barrel last year. So now we have this beautiful space that was put in by Lee Highway Nursery. I don't know who's doing that. Oh, there we go. So this is just our thank you to our amazing administration, our faculty, and PTO. PTO has been a great support in putting this project together. Wolftown Ruritan's Club, Grumman Parker, the Education Foundation, and Lee Highway Nursery were very crucial in getting this project to where it is right now. So thanks to all of them, because it wouldn't have been able to happen without them. And so for the purpose of this project, plain and simple, are our kids. These kids, from the moment the skid steer came out, these boys and even our little girls were just ready and so excited to see the space come to life. And then they're just mesmerized by the amazing work that was happening. And so our vision, Grumman Parker put together a mock-up of what the space would hopefully look like. And so the next slide shows that. And so this is it was their idea. Eventually we would like to add another rain barrel. The collection of one rain barrel, it doesn't add up very much. So having more than one is going to be vital to the space. And it really turned out exactly how they envisioned it. And so then we have our finished product. And that was our pad constructed by Lee Howie Nursery. It was done in 2 days. Beautiful, beautiful work. Pleasure to work with them. And here we are with Goodman Parker. The construction of the greenhouse and raised beds was completed on the 29th. The architects were led by Patricia Jesse. They were also fantastic to work with, very kind, very considerate, and patient. Mr. Coiner and the architects wasted no time getting all the materials moving and assembled. As you can see, Mr. Coiner, super supportive as our administrator, working that drill, getting that raised bed together. So that was a super great day to see everything in its place, constructed, and ready to use by our kids. And we even have space left over on the other, you can go to the next slide, space left over on the other side to hopefully add 2 more raised beds. Because these kiddos are so little, we don't need a whole lot of space, but we do have 3 grade levels that will hopefully utilize the space. And so we wanted to allow ample space between the raised beds and the whole space itself, so we could do lessons, whatever that may be, especially in the spring when we start talking about our life cycles. All right, so our first lesson for this space was utilizing the greenhouse. Unfortunately, at this time of year, it's too cold right now to use the greenhouse, but we were able to get down and talk about the purpose, why is it important to have this greenhouse, how can we utilize it when our temperatures are too cold outside and they're not yet conducive to growing. So after learning about the greenhouse and investigating this one in our new space, they were given the opportunity to construct their own. During our Mat Explorers, you can go ahead, yeah. During our Mat Explorers after school group, they were able to create a prototype of what they wanted their greenhouse to look like. And so we'd had the discussion about how it had to have airflow in and a way for water to get out so your seeds didn't drown. And so they were using some of our classroom manipulatives, and they were just super stoked to have the ability to put their hands on something and use what we had in the classroom to put their ideas out there. And so these were a few of their ideas. And then the next day they had the opportunity, here's some more of them, and they just loved working together. Some of them used tape. Some of them decided they didn't need tape. They just were able to put it together with the place value blocks. Some decided they needed a roof, so using a piece of paper. And so just watching their ideas and watching them talk and collaborate together was amazing. And so if you go to the next slide, they actually got the chance to build their greenhouse out of recycled materials. So we put the feelers out, we asked for gallon milk jugs, and they had to decide where they wanted their air vents, where they wanted their water to exit from, how many holes they thought they might need, and then how much soil that they would need to grow their seeds. So all of that was, it was very much a self-driven. We had me and then my teaching assistant, Kelsey DeJarnett, out there and did exactly what they wanted. So they planted basil seeds, and they decided how much water they needed to give it, and we sealed them up and got them ready to grow. Click to the next slide. And they have some amazing teamwork. These boys didn't waste any time. They're so ready to help. And go to the next one. And so there are our greenhouses. And I brought some friends here with me today. They're not quite sure if they want to come up, but we have Brooks Coffee, and we have Mr. Tycoons, and they are just a pleasure to work with. And we got to investigate today. You can wave, smile and wave. But they really have loved seeing these seeds grow. So we got to investigate today, journal a little bit about the growth that we had inside. And when you ask a kid what they might use basil for, the concoctions and the ideas are really interesting. I'm not quite so sure I might eat any of it, but they were just really were absorbed in this hands-on project. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to use this space this coming spring and for them to use the skills that we've been learning in Mad Explorers. And then there's one more slide, I think. Yep. So there's our growth. So that's 7 days germination. And so we've talked about the condensation and the heat that circulates within the greenhouse, and they're just super jazzed about it. So I'm very lucky that I get to work with such an amazing group of kids. All boys this month, so that's interesting. But they're great. So thank you all so much.
Yes, I'm a big supporter. And I'm ready for phase 2. I'd love to see a chicken coop and a pen. And I think we could feed them with scraps left over from the cafeteria.
I love
and eggs for breakfast. I think it's a great idea, and you just let me know, I'll help.
Thank you. You should have seen them composting those rotting pumpkins. These boys were like, it won't fit, and so they were trying their hardest to get it to fit into that composter. So they're all ready to go.
Love it.
Oh, thank you,
Up here.
So this is Ty and this is Brooke. Did you want to go get your greenhouse, buddy? And so Ty actually didn't get to do the greenhouse project. He was feeling under the weather, but he's going to get to do our projects come in December. Did you want to walk up and show him what's growing? Did you want to go with Brooke?
Come
Go
back.
with Brooke?
Go that
You
way.
want to go that way?
The other thing I would say is I agree with Mr. Sheeds. Don't give up on the cow dream either.
Did you hear that?
So I agree too, and
Mr. Shees will be able to help build the barn maybe next week.
I'm all about phase 3, and I got your animals, so you just let me know when you're ready.
That's good. Well, we're looking forward, too, to working with the FFA at the high school and the farm-to-table group and the ag in the classroom, so there are lots of things lined up for it.
Yep. And I'd reached out to Addie, but unfortunately she was under the weather, and so she was going to help with this project. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully in the next coming months that she can join in our project.
And just another shout out to the folks in the community, too. We wouldn't have been able to do this physically or financially without their support and help, so it was a great project.
We're super lucky.
Thank you, Ms. Dodson, and thank you, boys, for bringing that up so that we could see it. The next thing on our agenda is an instructional report, and I believe that Superintendent Graham will do that tonight.
Yes. So tonight, we're going to provide you information and the data from the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, the VKRP. So that measures students' readiness in the subdomains of math, self-regulation, social skills, and then literacy. Literacy is that PALS assessment that Mr. Coiner told you about last month. So the data from these assessments, and this is taken by pre-K kindergarten students, they actually take the mathematics portion and the literacy portion, the self-regulation and the social skills. That's done by a teacher rating scale, so the kids don't take that portion. But the data from these assessments produces information to guide decisions for like the student level, then the classroom level, and then the whole school level. It highlights the strengths of the pre-K and kindergarten students and brings attention to areas where students need support. And it helps drive kind of the day-to-day instruction. It guides conversations that our teachers have with the families. And then it also helps inform decisions about what additional like professional development we need for teachers. So next slide. You can see on this slide how we compare to the state average coming out for 2021, and then 2022, we were at 46.8, so a little behind the state in 2021 average. And then this past year, 2022, we were at 59.43%, so a little above the state average. To meet the benchmark, students must score at or above the benchmark in all 4 domains. So if a student was marked a little lower in one domain, they're not meeting the benchmark. So this is that youngest student meeting all 4 domains. So then we've broken it down for you. If you go to the next slide. That's the PALS assessment, which is the data that you were able to see last month for Mr. Coyner's presentation. So you can see that we did make major gains from 21 to 22, and that we were above the state average. And so that's assessing a student's phonological awareness, the alphabet recognition, and then the knowledge of letter sounds and spelling. The next slide, we have the math data. Again, above the state average. So this kind of assesses the student's mathematical thinking, objects and counting. So a student would need to be able to count like above instead of like 1 to 10, say what comes next. The student needs to know like, oh, 11, 12, 13, instead of just knowing like how to count a certain set. And then self-regulation. This one a little bit below the state. Again, this is based on a teacher report of students. So you can see like from the slide, it's a student's behavior with peers and adults as well as their engagement with materials and tasks in the classroom. So there's the 2 domains, the self-regulation and the social skills. So students below the benchmark, they may be like more distractible. They may need more reminders to complete tasks. So nothing bad, things you would expect from students that age. It's just, the goal is to help them do exactly what this test is, self-regulate more. So the goal is to always challenge kids to give them like multi-step tasks where they can practice these skills. And the final slide, the social skills. Again, a little below the state, but again, this where it's the teacher's reporting based on each child. And that's just a child learning how to take turns, how to share, just navigating, a new social environment. Some kids come to us and have never been to a pre-K situation or, never been to school. So for some students, they are learning how to navigate the world socially. So we just wanted to share this with you and show you where we were compared with the state as far as that readiness assessment.
Does anybody have any questions?
Not as exciting as the agricultural presentation we just saw. But that helps with these things we were learning with the social skills. So.
Are they evaluated twice a year? It says 2022. Is it fall and then spring? Fall, winter, spring. Okay. And so right now that 2022 is based on the fall, just the fall, and we have 2 more.
Aside from us here in our school district, who else do we give these scores to? Other entities?
Well, this is a state assessment, so they receive that. And then the data is available for our teachers to be able to talk with parents.
And these scores were assessed when? I mean, what month? In
Yeah, go ahead.
So these scores were from fall of last year. So it was the fall assessment from the previous year. The 2022 scores, I'm sorry, this is the 2022 report. So it's from last year's scores. And you asked about who else is getting these scores. So, and I mentioned a little bit of this when I presented before, but we do the PALS in kindergarten, first and second. So those results we share with Waverly as we're moving towards that 3rd grade SOL. And the math is what I spoke about a little bit before, is that the state of Virginia doesn't really have a universal math assessment for 1st and 2nd graders. So we sort of jumped from that statewide data from that VKRP to the 3rd grade SOL test. My feel is that the state is moving in the direction of creating that for 1st and 2nd grade, which will give us obviously a much better continuum of success for students that, again, we would share with Waverly. sharing the kindergarten scores and try to apply it to third grade decision-making, nonsensical, right? So I think at least I see the state moving in that direction.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Coiner? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coiner. The next section on our agenda is public comments, and I'd just like to remind everyone that you have 3 minutes when you come forward, and we are looking forward to hearing your comments. And we have the timer set up for you, and when you come forward, if you would please state your name and also where you're from in Madison, please. And so, who's first?
Good evening. My name is Priscilla Flory, and I live in Malvern. And it is my pleasure to be here tonight to thank you for taking time, giving of yourselves, giving of your skills to lead a most sacred calling. Our children are the most important treasures in Madison County. And you have a high calling, not just by the people of Madison County, but you have a high calling by God, because He has created them with a purpose and a plan, and you all are part of that purpose and that plan. And so I personally want to thank you for your time, your gifts, your skills, and it is my privilege to pray for you, which I would like to do now. So, Father, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful group of people. Thank you that they have been called, they have been chosen, you have a purpose for them, and you have a plan. And Father, we thank you for each child of Madison County. We thank you for their parents. We thank you for their families. We thank you for the plans and the purposes that you have for each child. We thank you that you are a good Father. We give you thanks and praise. Thank you for what you've already done here tonight. Thank you for what you're going to do. And right now, thank you. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Ward.
Misha Jones, Radiant, Virginia. The last speaker was correct. Our kids are sacred, and they deserve to be in an environment that's inclusive and addresses their needs, their educational needs. Again, another agenda that does not address anything to do with the kids' education. Nothing. Again, another agenda that does not say how we support our teachers, what you need from the community to come in to help support, to bring up our test scores, to make sure that our kids can read. Nothing. Nothing at all. Personal priorities on the agenda. This board has done nothing but create a divide and has done nothing to bring the parents together to be part of their children's education, but more so separated. Nothing at all, nothing. Every month we come here to find items on this agenda of what we're gonna do to support our kids and make them better. The teachers are doing it. There's such a disconnect here, such a disconnect. The community deserves better than what you're doing.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Terry Sisson. I'm from Riva, Virginia. I'm a school psychologist. I was a school psychologist in Madison County for 6 years, and I'm a proud mom of Andrew Sisson. He's a junior at Madison County High School this year. I know one of the things that will be discussed later is allowing teachers to have guns in the classroom. And I realize that within that, it was already stated that right now it's not legal in Virginia. One of my questions is, why do we keep bringing up things that are not even legal? Why can't we talk about things that are an actual possibility to change, such as helping our students with their reading scores? Before we go forth and talk about allowing teachers to carry handguns in the school system, I want to bring up a few facts. According to Everytown Research, which is an evidence-based program, an armed teacher is much more likely to shoot a student bystander or to be shot by police themselves if there is an armed shooter in the building. Access to firearms, irrespective of age, triples the risk of death by suicide and doubles the risk of death by homicide. Is that what we want in our schools? Assessments from Teach Plus and the NEA asked teachers whether or not they'd want guns in the school, and they strongly oppose it. 80% for Teach Plus and 82% for the NEA. There was a 2019 study that talked about school shooter characteristics, and in that there was no evidence that the presence of an SRO in a school building stopped an active shooter from coming in. And it is no evidence that armed teachers would be any more effective than a trained SRO. On the contrary, they would likely increase rather than decrease gun violence in schools. And then you have to look at liability. Who's going to be liable? Who's responsible if something goes wrong? A student can find or steal a teacher's firearm. The weapon could accidentally discharge. Teachers can shoot innocent bystanders. Who's going to deal with that? Is that something that you all are willing to take on? And in Kansas, when districts sought to arm teachers, insurance companies refused to insure the school at all. So who's going to have our backs? I want to say that teachers are not trained sharpshooters. They're not trained first responders. They're caregivers, and that's what we need them to be. I'm going to email all of my research to you, as I did last time I talked. There are alternative ways to provide safety in the schools, and I'm going to send you a document that talks about how to do that. And I'm also going to send a link that is every incident mishandled guns in schools.
Thank you, Mrs.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Mike Sharman from Novum. It's Thanksgiving time, so thank you to each one of you. Each one of you up there, both staff as well as the elected officials, the student representative, for giving of your time. You know, just coming as I do to most of the school board meetings, this seems like an enormous amount of time that I'm doing, but I know you are multiple and multiple and multiple more times, so thank you very much for that. Thank you for being stalwart and willing to follow the law as opposed to just what people are demanding you do. As a public official, it's often so hard to make that distinction between serving the people and yet serving the people according to the law. So the number of the things that you have are in regards to the sexually explicit content, both in curriculum as well as in libraries. So it's important to look at what the law is about it as opposed to just what we all feel like we want to do. So first, the Code of Virginia tells you you have to make policies as a school board, and you have to make them timely. So one of the things that I've heard at past school board meetings and that I read in a paper is that you aren't following past school board policies. But the one they're referencing is for the public, not for the school board. You have to follow the Code of Virginia. The Code of Virginia has said this past July, they passed a law that says for you all to look at sexually explicit material. Not what maybe Ms. Collier thinks is sexually explicit, or Mr. Sheets, or on down the line, but a specific statute that defines what is sexually explicit and does it in an objective way, not a subjective way like what is lewd and lascivious. No, it details it out explicitly. Then one of those things, it lists out a number of things, but the easiest one to pull from that sexually explicit is if it describes sexual conduct, you're not supposed to have it in the schools. And sexual conduct is just what we think. I mean, we could list it out and discuss it, but the statute does it for you. It is, again, objective, not subjective. One of the most important things, though, is that in every single bit of your instruction, you're supposed to have moral education. 22.1208, emphasis on moral education, says the entire scheme of instruction in the public schools shall emphasize moral education through lessons given by teachers and imparted by appropriate reading selections, which would necessarily exclude sexually explicit material. Then you have character education required, 22.1208.01, and it says the purpose of, and it says you shall establish character education, and I'll let you all get to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is important though. If you could please not adjust this mic, it's very important. It stays exactly like this. I know you can hear it here, but the people listening at home, and for when Miss Liz Patterson has to go back and transcribe all this, she can't hear anything coming through the recorder.
It's
So if you
upside down.
please Leave it just like this.
It's upside down.
No, it's fine. I can raise it, but that's fine.
Thank you. Could the next person please come on down?
Lisa Davis, Locust Dale. I just got a couple of issues with comments. Concerning your ESSER funds, I'm not against federal funds as long as there's an understanding that once they are gone, that additional monies required to maintain these ESSER programs are not going to be a burden on the Madison County taxpayers in the following years. These programs must be programmed into future budgets at the expense of eliminating something else. Like any federal program, once the ESSER money dries up, they expect the awardee to take over any follow-on cost. I hope this school board does not expect Madison County taxpayers to pay more to continue maintaining whatever was bought or people hired. I just want to ensure that future school funding recognizes this and not get complacent with the ESSER funds. You must make hard choices on your budget. Also, in your breakdown of this funding by sections in bullet format, where can we read the detailed data such as evidence-based interventions, loss in structural time impacts, and how many students are still virtual learning and per student costs? I'm just asking for next level of details. And also, again, I've read many of the restricted books in the high school library and questioned the merit in some of the books and how this is enriching kids' lives. Again, kudos for trying to meet all Madisonians' concerns by keeping the books in the library, but have them restricted with parental or a guardian approval to check out. You had to do something short-term until the policy was written. Madison County High School Handbook ironically states under its dress code, students' clothing must be free from language that is profane or images that depict illegal conduct, or students must ensure that their private parts are covered. Yet students can get sexually explicit material in the school library. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Peggy Carpenter from Brightwood, Virginia. I'm very concerned about the education of my great-grandchildren. As was said earlier, they are a gift from God, and it is our responsibility to raise them in a way that is not objectionable to Him. I want to just discuss the issue of parental guidance. All of us were children at one time. And we all remember being very inquisitive, right? Parental permission, I think I stated it wrong earlier, parental permission may give their child permission to check that book out, but when they are reading and looking at something that's sensational, they are bound to show it to their inquisitive friends who do not have permission. And I want you to think about that when you are making your policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Karina Barden, and I live in Wolftown. The First Amendment of our Constitution states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." End quote. One of the brilliant things about our Constitution is that practicing our First Amendment rights helps citizens develop critical thinking skills and moral fiber to responsibly handle all our other rights. Part of being a well-informed voter and a good leader is the ability to look at any issue from a variety of perspectives, which is what literature and factual information help people do. Our teenagers are on the cusp of being voters and are on their way to being the next generation of leaders. The Supreme Court in 1943, West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett, and again in 1969, Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District, affirmed that students do have First Amendment rights, and these rights are not suspended when they enter school property. This board has repeatedly demonstrated a disturbing level of intent to police, censure, and control the developing sexuality of other people's kids, in part by limiting their access to educational material and literature under the guise of what is good for the students. And in doing so, has disregarded the fact that parents can contact the school for themselves and exempt their own students from materials that they would prefer to discuss at home, and the First Amendment rights of the students. At the same time that this board seeks to suppress information and ideas, there is nothing notable being done about staff morale and retention, about student mental health, or abysmal SOL scores. And now the board wants to explore bringing firearms into schools. Whether talking about the plot of a dystopian novel or actual historical events, this scenario never ends well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin Scott, Brightwood. When folks accuse you guys of pushing Christian morals or your own parenting choices on all the students here. I just got to vehemently disagree. I think when you eliminate radical and completely perverse and inappropriate content from the school, that's not in any way censorship. Rather, that's leaving room for parents to make choices. We can't just have every crazy and inappropriate idea because somebody argued it, assume that it has an equal place at the table with parents. And ultimately, you guys have to go err on the side of caution. If somebody wants to take these nasty books and go read them to their kids at home, God bless their hearts, that's fine. But I'm actually listening to them argue that my child has to be, in order for them to feel okay, like you guys aren't censoring, they're demanding that my child be exposed to it? That makes zero sense. And there's a word for that. It's called grooming, and that's what they're arguing. This is not okay. You can't expose parents' children to inappropriate, unage-appropriate things, to sexual content and a whole host of other things, and just expect that you can find a one-size-fits-all that incorporates also every crazy person who says that a child should be exposed to sexual stuff. They're trying to force you guys into a box that doesn't exist. You can't make them happy and do anything that even closely resembles being appropriate for children. And that's not a matter of opinion. That's not me saying that. That's just common sense. And I would like to think that that's the lens that we're supposed to look at things through, not finding some sort of common ground or something that halfway sells out our children's safety and security. But something that wholeheartedly, I hope that you guys have the room to stand in a place that wholeheartedly eliminates you guys from being lumped in with a large group of people that seem to have the opinion that the right thing to do here is expose kids to sexual content. I shouldn't even be up here having to say this. It's kind of silly, but when people come down to the mic and argue the other side, strange or not, somebody actually has to get up and say that. We can't have you guys disseminating and making available sexual content to kids. That's obscene and absurd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Taylor from Wolftown. I'd like to commend the students who spoke about book banning at the last board meeting. One of the students spoke about their experiences reading The Bluest Eye and The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and it brought to mind an event in my life. Like that student, I also experienced trauma as a child. But later, when I was 11 years old, a school librarian helped change my life. She introduced me to the book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. That classic book, written in 1943, is one that I feel certain you would now want to ban. It contains passages about violence, adultery, loss of faith, sexual assault, and pedophilia. It taught me about the immigrant experience, poverty, alcoholism, and abuse. It also taught me about hope, resilience, perseverance, and the power of education and hard work. It taught me that in my own experience, I was not alone, and it furthered my resolve to excel in my education. It may be hard to believe that one book could be that impactful, but that's the power of literature. My point is simply that literature must be evaluated in its fullest context and not simply based on one or two passages. I would ask you to consider, especially in the removal of books by Black and LGBTQ authors, that trauma is going to be central to many of their stories. They are sharing the truth of the experience of marginalized people, and that is often going to be difficult to read. Through these stories, however, we learn a great deal about compassion empathy, justice, and shared humanity. As another caution, please do consider the constitutional issue. The Supreme Court has ruled on the issue of censorship in schools in the Island Trees decision in 1982. That decision confirmed that book removal is not constitutionally permitted simply because school officials disagree with the contents. In other words, personal opinion is irrelevant. Educational value is what is important here, as determined by professionals. Earlier this year, the St. Louis School District returned The Bluest Eye to its library shelves upon threat of a lawsuit. Those of us who advocate for the works of Toni Morrison and others to be available, not forced on students, but to be available, we are not outliers. The Bluest Eye has been recommended by the National Council of Teachers of English, the Accelerated Reader Series for high school students, and many others. Books by Morrison appear on many required reading lists for high school students, including Catholic high schools. Please focus instead on student achievement and school culture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Shari, I'm from Madison. All children are loved by, I hope, everyone, including God. But that is all children. All children don't come from the same background. All children don't need the same things from us at school. From what I know of Jesus, he included everyone. He wanted everyone to suffer less. He suffered tremendously to make that happen. I think we as a community need to get outside just our comfort zones and realize that we need to take care of all of the children who need an education. We need to quit fighting about things that already have an easy solution. Parents already have a way to protect their children from books in the school that they feel are objectionable. We need to be supporting our students, helping them read, learn math, get along, follow rules, follow regulations, and we need to support our teachers. And before you start thinking of arming teachers, which is a moot point when it's still illegal in the state, please ask your teachers. They're the ones on the front line, along with the principals and the staff. I don't think you've asked for their input at all as how to make their schools, their lives, their students' lives safer. When guns are the number one killer of our children, the thought of making more guns available horrifies me. I'm just asking you to reach a little deeper and try to think of people that are not like just ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. As I'm looking around, I don't see anybody getting ready to come forward, but please know that you're welcome. Spoke too soon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dale Freeman. I'm the pastor of Fellowship Baptist Church here in Madison. began to look at some of the school board priorities. And I noted number 3 when I was thinking about a particular subject that I'm going to address this evening, is to implement best practices to address the well-being, dignity, value of students and staff, so all members of our school community feel supported and respected. And as I thought about this subject of sexual explicit materials and books and taking some of the books out of the curriculum and the library, I thought about the vast responsibility that we all have as adults, as parents, school board members, teachers, pastors, community workers. And while we may not agree exactly what those books are, the content of them, I think we all realize that sex is a gift of God. And if it's going to be discussed, it needs to be discussed in the light of the giver of that gift, not in a debased, devalued way as some of the material that has been pointed out by the school board. And I think that we ought to commend the school board for taking that stand and looking into this material to know that they're working with the parents for the good of their child and their children. It's not working against them. It's working with them. And so I want to say I appreciate you doing that. I think it's very important. I also think that at some point we have to realize that it's not the educator's place to instruct and instill some things into our children that is parental. It's the parent's place. And I think that's how we work together. It's not, the parents need the teachers need the parents. We work together as a community. And so I don't think that this is by any means overstepping. I think it's working with. And so I want to say thank you. Thank you for putting that together, and thank you for suggesting that this explicit material be removed. It's really appalling that we would have to have this conversation. Do we or do we not put explicit sexual material to our high schoolers? We should not be having this discussion. I hope each of you have a happy Thanksgiving, and may God bless you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matt. I'm from Madison. I always find it very interesting when I come to these meetings. Obviously you have two very defined sides on things, right? And as I sit here tonight and I listen to both sides kind of give their argument, it literally sounds like, I think that one lady earlier said something about the children had a constitutional right, First Amendment constitutional right to come in here and practice free speech. But do they not have a constitutional Second Amendment right? Do the teachers not have a constitutional Second Amendment right? It's just kind of really interesting for me. We as a culture seem to go in and pick and choose the things that best fit our desires or what we want to happen, but we tend to fail and leave out the rest of that, right? If you're going to sit in here and come and talk about having a constitutional First Amendment right to say and practice free speech, you also have to recognize the same aspect that others in this school would have the Second Amendment right to defend themselves and protect themselves and others. Let's not forget that there's a whole document that is all-encompassing of all of our rights. So if you're going to pick and choose which rights you think are important to you, understand that somebody else is going to pick and choose the rights that they're important to them. I'd also like to throw out there, I do think that the thing in question here today was wasn't it to send something to the teachers to ask them if they felt comfortable with this? So it's not like they're deciding anything now. So do your homework, do your education, read up on these things before you come here. It is to ask the teachers and the staff if they felt comfortable. I don't think they were deciding anything yet or not on the firearm thing. So throw that out there. I'll also throw out one last thing, the school board as an offer. If that ever becomes an option, I come from a community, I work with a community of folks, and nothing against our sheriff's department, they're great folks, but I work with a community of folks that are the most highly trained firearms personnel in the world, and they will be graciously willing to come up and give training free of charge, or I will pay out of my own pocket to have every one of the staff members and that chooses to do that have the latest and greatest personal defense training, security training, active shooter training. I will pay out of pocket for that. If I have to, I'll make it a business. I'll pay for my business to do it. So I just want to leave that with you guys.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Meadows. I'm from Brightwood. Can everybody hear me? I wasn't planning on speaking. I came because I met somebody, a stranger in a grocery store, Food Line, who said that the meeting was here tonight. I have grandchildren in college at Virginia Tech and Longwood. And one of the things that worries me is our local functions and civic involvement, and I'm really glad I came to hear people speak from the community. When the agenda is specifying best practices, my concern is that you're dealing with a national standard, and I would hope that we in Virginia have better than best. In other words, I don't agree with the best practices that are set up nationally. I am not in support of the NEA and other national organizations. I think the priority of our children here in Madison County is greater than a global community. And so I would like to suggest and to support you all and to say that our children locally suffer in different ways or lack resources that major cities have. We have different priorities, a greater need of rural help and education. And so when best practices are stated as a goal, I would hope that you would publicize those best practices so that I can actually see what your methodology is on what you're trying to set up. I'm a firm believer in the Constitution. I think that children don't quite have all the constitutional rights because they're minors. The parents have the rights over the children. And so it is a partnership, and nobody wants to see teachers against parents and vice versa. So thank you for your hard work. And I would hope next time that you could put something on the billboard instead of the Powder Puff football and put that the school board is meeting. Because I got here about 10 minutes late because all of a sudden I went, oh yeah, that's right. And I think maybe we'd have a better turnout, and civic engagement is really important whether we have children in school or not. I'm a taxpayer and I love our children, the kids who work in the stores, the high schoolers that I go and support the games for. And thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Are there further comments that the public would like to make? If not, this concludes our public comment section of our agenda. We do thank all of you for coming and being brave enough to come up and speak whatever it is that you want us to know, because it does take a lot of bravery to stand up and say what you believe. So thank you very much. We'll go on to the next section of our agenda, which is business information. And the first one that we have is the development of the draft policy concerning sexually explicit content in the Madison County Public School library materials. So that is what we are working on. You'll see a copy of it, and I know that it was posted with our agenda so that all of you hopefully have had a chance to look at it so far. This is a document in process. It is a draft that we are working on. And I know sometimes some of the things that we do and say may not make a lot of attention because we are working out loud where we're trying to figure things out. And so it sometimes may seem we're going this way and then it looks like we're going that way. But it's an important policy and there are lots of components to it. So we want to take it seriously and make sure that we do the right thing for the right reasons. So, Mr. Wingate?
Good evening. I just want to hit that kind of some of the key points of this policy, and as Mrs. Allen said, this is a draft. It's the first time that's kind of being publicized here, and so fully expect it'll get better over the course before we vote on it next month or in the following months, whenever that is. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but just want to say a couple of things about it. This is for library materials. There's a separate policy for instructional materials that we're going to vote on tonight, I believe. This is focused on the library things, and basically it's based on two things. It's my belief, and I think many of the board members' belief, that our schools ought to be reliable partners with parents as they execute their right to protect their children from accessing sexually explicit content through school resources. This is only about school resources, and parents who desire to have their children access anything have us, fully able to do that. When I reviewed the books in the library, I was able to pull up books I was worried about very, very quickly in seconds on the internet for free. And so any parent who wants to do that can certainly do that. But my belief is, and this draft policy's belief is that it's not appropriate for those resources to be in the library where your 14-year-old son or daughter can browse through shelves and find things that are certainly adult material for sure. And secondly, I believe it's unfair for Madison taxpayers to be asked to fund these things that many find obscene, and some may not, and that's fine. But many certainly in Madison do, and so it's not fair to ask them to fund morally objectionable materials in the schools. So basically, that's the argument that the policy makes, is that we won't have that content in the schools, and where it is found in the schools, the school board has a right to say it's not appropriate to have in those schools. And parents who wish to have that, their parental right certainly is valid, and they can go to the public library or do it online, or Amazon is amazing. You can have Amazon have the book there in 2 days if you so desire. I think there'll be a time for questions about the policy. Is it right to have the superintendent be the person who does it? I think is one of the questions we got to kind of figure out as a board. How the sort of the details of that work. We've had some conversation about. I think we're still kind of working through the details of that. The policy also talks about screening of new criteria. One of the problems is that the libraries, use a subscription service, and so a lot of times they're getting things from the American Library Association. And as somebody said earlier, we, I think here in Madison, don't want to be governed by big organizations out of New York or California or somewhere. And so we want to be careful about making sure that we have a screening criteria in place so that when we do get bulk shipments of books, that we're making sure that there's not explicit content in there, and that we have a vehicle to get rid of those things. And so the policy talks about that a little bit. And then there's a definition of sexually explicit, I think, is in kind of, it's certainly can be made better, but it's thought through to try to make it very, very clear what it is. And one of the objections we've heard certainly is that, if you do this and you're going to throw out Shakespeare and Chaucer in the Bible, and I think just common sense shows that if there's a definition that says we know that those things are very, very different. They mention sexual activity certainly, but they're not graphic in detail. And we have common sense enough to say that there's a difference between Chaucer and Shakespeare and some of the content we're talking about. I don't know if any more, so I think that's the overview of the content. I don't know if any board has any questions about it.
I just have one question about superintendent or designee. So just in case Ms. Graham decides to get hit by the lottery or something like that, we don't have to come back and change the whole policy because she's, not here or whatever. So superintendent or designee, I would advise. Do you want, I wrote notes on mine. Do you want that to?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, sure. I think that's a good idea. We can add that in there for sure.
So, there you go.
Damon, did you? I'm sorry. Mr. Myers. Mr. Sheets?
I wish that I could take credit for doing this kind of stuff. Mr. Wingate's he's really kind of moved the waters out of the way for us on this. I've read through it. It looks good the way it is. I'm not disagreeing with what Ms. Collier said. I hope that Mrs. Graham is with us for a long time. She's very, very, very good at doing what she does.
I did insinuate that.
But and please don't play the lottery, especially the Powerball. Anyhow, I'm for this the way it is, and I'm sure if we can make some adjustments, I'll be for it as well. But I'm absolutely 100% behind keeping this stuff out of Madison County schools and away from children.
So when I look at this, and I have gone through it paragraph by paragraph, I do have some questions about how things are going to play out in reality when the policy actually goes into effect, if it does, or when it does. The first one is the school board shall initiate the review of library materials that are suspected of sexually explicit content by directing the superintendent to examine each identified portion of the library material containing sexually explicit content and make a determination if the content is sexually explicit as defined in this policy. And then it says the superintendent, within 1 month of the school board direction, shall make this determination and notify the board and the public at the next public school board meeting if the reviewed material contains sexually explicit content. I'm just a little confused about it says the school board shall initiate. So we could say, and you can help me here because your words, or kind of your words, I just don't understand how is the superintendent going to review all of the how is she supposed to know what's in all these books? And that's what I just don't understand. Because there may be some books that have been pointed out to the public and to us by you, but there's probably other books that need to be looked at as well. There may be. So I don't understand how she's going to find those passages. And I think it goes on to say that we're going to bring those passages to her attention. I don't know how I'm going to know what passages are in books to bring to her attention. And it puts all the responsibility on the school board members to find those excerpts and give them to the superintendent so that she can decide if those passages are sexually explicit. So I'm confused about, as a member of the board, I don't know how we are supposed to find those passages. Now, not speaking beyond the 26, but in other cases too. There's a lot of books in the library. And I just don't understand how that can happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've certainly talked to the principals and librarians and the superintendent about is trying to minimize the workload. Not trying to pile stuff on the principals and the librarians, and so I think there's been a couple of iterations of this draft policy, and I think the fact that it ended up on the school board is right. I mean, we're the ones who are responsible ultimately, and so instead of putting that onus on the principals and the librarians, I think that the board is probably the right one to say, take a look at these books. So I'm trying to protect the principals and librarians from having to scrub through library shelves. And there's no expectation in this policy of anybody scrubbing through these library shelves and finding stuff. I think, in my mind, the books that we've identified are the ones that I'm kind of most concerned about. And so I don't foresee, there's no requirement in this policy for us to go through scrubbing through the library shelves. I think when it's brought to our attention, I mean, we're elected representatives. When a parent brings the books like this to our attention, I think it is our due diligence to go and find out. But I think that's that's kind of the mechanism for this. We or a parent brings it to our attention and says, okay, here's an issue. We as a board look at it. We vote and say, okay, this is an issue. And if it's a majority vote, then say to the superintendent, please take a look at this book we think meets this policy. So I think it, in my mind, and again, I'm ready to make it better, but in my mind, it kind of finds a sweet spot between minimizing workload, but also providing us as representatives of the people with a vehicle to sort of identify books. And then for the superintendent, I make it very clear, we do not expect anybody to read all the books. One of the complaints has been, well, there's context, et cetera, and I think that's very true for adult readers. But for 14-year-old readers, context in many ways doesn't matter, especially obscene material. A 14-year-old child's not ready to handle context of some of the stuff in these books. And so the policy very clearly says that the superintendent is not required to read the whole books. They can read the section that we identify and make a common sense application of the sexually explicit definition that's in the policy. Does that make sense?
It does. The only thing I was thinking is we have been a board that has supported the parents' right to get involved. But what I read kind of put it on us. If it said the school board in conjunction with parents, I mean, I don't know how to word it, but it just seems like the way it's worded right now, it all comes down to the school board finding these excerpts and has nothing to do with the parents. Or I can't see it. Maybe that's my concern.
I think it's good. I can make it more clear. I think it's a good concern. I can make it more clear that parents obviously have the right to notify the school board when there's an issue, and the school board then can take a look at it. So I certainly think that's within kind of the idea, and so I can make that more explicit, though.
Yeah, I just think the way I'm reading it, it kind of says we're the beginning and the end of finding these books, and I think that's a pretty lofty.
Yeah, I think it's a good valid point. I think we're the end, but we don't necessarily.
The end,
we're not the
maybe.
beginning. I don't think you're right.
Right. So and that would be the concern that I have. I think parents still need to be able to contact us with information. And I think that the policy that we had before, which pretty much was parent-generated, and I think now we've written a policy that I didn't see parents having any opportunity to say, I found this book, my child brought this book home, and this is what I read in it. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess we're going to have to do you guys see what I'm saying? Or
I see what you're saying, but in no way, shape, or form does this say that a parent can't tell the school board that they found some sexually explicit material in the book. And it says the school board shall initiate. It doesn't say that parents can't bring to the school board a book.
I'm not making that argument.
I think
What
you're
I'm
splitting
saying
hairs,
is,
but.
well, what I'm saying is, if you're going to write a policy, you're going to have to go by the policy. And this policy kind of maybe could include information that comes from parents, not just what we find on our own. That's all I'm saying. So.
Yeah, and so I hear you. I think it's fine. I think it's good. I mean, the section 5 is all about parental rights, and so it can add a blurb in there in section 5 that parents. I mean, I know from my experience on the board in the last year, parents have no trouble contacting me about issues.
That's
a
true.
lot. So we certainly get a lot of word from them, and I think we'll continue to do that. But I can add a line in there. I think about parents have the right and the responsibility to contact school members, board members, if they have concerns, and I think that would meet your concern.
So, Nita, is there anybody else? I mean, I'm not trying to split hairs. I'm just trying to include other people other than just the school board, and I think that's important. And contacting us would be the way to start it.
I mean, I think it's fine, and you have I wrote edits on a piece of paper so he could incorporate those. The biggest one was superintendent designee and/or committee, whatever we want to call it. But just to make sure we can cover, she decides to take a 6-week vacation or something. we have to make a decision,
6 hours.
or something. There's always something. But yeah, I think, again, this is the draft and the first read.
Right.
So we, sort of hand in our comments and we
And
go from there.
And I think, your question on here, does this contradict KBL, is an important point because, we're making a distinction between there's a policy that says parents can object to a policy, and this, that stays the same. We may adjust a little bit to account for this, but the policy of this policy is at the school board. The school board is different than an individual parent, and so those two policies, I don't think it contradicts it at all because they're two separate entities. And so, when there's protest about, the board doing something, the board, legal, this has gone through legal review and the legal team, it says that the school board and the superintendent have the right to make these decisions for the good of the community. It's our responsibility to do that, our right and our responsibility. So I don't think it contradicts KBL at all.
And there's one typo, I think, on the back page.
Could I add just a couple things? Maybe that first section, in section 2, part A, with the school board initiating the review, it might be more streamlined for parents if it was similar to policy KLB, so they know that they could notify their librarian or their principal. So some of the questionable materials as they pop up, if it funneled through us first, it wouldn't necessarily be at a meeting that you all are telling me about it. It might be me saying, hey, this book came up this month, and we want you to know that it was against the criteria set out in section 4, and that we're thinking this might be a book that is set aside. So maybe kind of let parents know that it doesn't have to necessarily go through you all, that it can just go through the channel that they already knows in place.
Okay, I can add something like that.
I think one of the problems that we've had, and all of us have said it, we don't see each other but once a month. And I think with you being able to take information from parents and deal with it quickly and be able to get it to us so that we can take a look at it, probably would be good, because you're, boots on the ground every day. So if that's an option,
I think that sounds good. And speaking with librarians, they did point out that it would be easier for them to update a list of new acquisitions monthly, because they do get new books, so they could keep something rolling like that on the internet for everyone on our website.
Okay.
And then a great suggestion from Ms. Wood, the librarian, was to keep a running list of books that have been removed so that future librarians or staff members don't accidentally purchase those books again. So to just keep a list so the public can see any book that's been removed.
well, and it goes on as well to say that if a book has been removed, it can be challenged to be put back in. Am I reading that incorrectly?
It says if a book has been retained, a parent can challenge it through that policy, KLB, or I can't remember that acronym. Was it KLB or KBL or whatever that is?
Where is it?
KLB.
KLB, thank you.
KL.
So it says if it's been retained, then a parent has that right to challenge it.
Oh, you mean if a book, they can't challenge it if a book is taken out?
Right.
So if a book is taken out, it's the end for that book. And you cannot have a parent want to say, well, wait a minute.
Right, because the policy, and the reason why is because the policy does not ask for there to be a committee or the superintendent to read the entire book, because the whole idea is that the context to a 14-year-old doesn't matter very much. It's obscene, it's explicit, it shouldn't be there. And so if you put in there something that the book can be reviewed, if it's kicked out, then you're asking us all, because they all will, every single book that is removed will be challenged. You kind of know that. And so you're asking us to read all those books, which is, in my opinion, is not necessary, because the explicit content makes it inappropriate for a 14-year-old child no matter what. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read through all of the books. I'm reading one right now, and there are little pockets of things that come up. But I'd really have to sit down and think about whether that information is enough to apply this policy to. I don't know, because the policy hasn't been used before, so I'm trying to read what I'm reading right now and try to reconcile that with how we would use this policy. And I know that sounds confusing, and sometimes I get confused with it too, but I do think we're taking this very seriously and trying to write a policy that we're going to be living with for quite a while. So thank you for your effort in trying to put together something so that it's a draft right now. And I think it helps to have a conversation so that things get explained, because sometimes when I read them and think about it, I'm not really sure what exactly is meant. So.
Anna, do you have other, was that at the end of your comments? Do you have other ones?
Only that, again, in section 2, if I've just kind of like what Ms. Allen was saying, if I've read through a book and I feel like it doesn't quite fit this policy, then in that instance, for F, the board, if I'm reading this right, the board's going to say, okay, it stays, and then someone else would have to follow KLB to try to get it removed, correct?
Right, and that would be a much more in-depth
Okay.
reading, right? Because KLB?
KLB.
Thank you. KLB requires that in-depth
Okay.
reading. And so, I think the reason for that, I think, is those gray areas. And, there might be some gray areas. I think, just for those, for example, those 26 books, I think 22 of them is very easy and clear that they're explicit content and inappropriate. There are probably 3 or 4 that are kind of gray. And so your determination, I think, would be final. But if a parent came back and said, you know what, that's really not appropriate, then I think a fuller reading of those books would be appropriate under that KLB policy. Does that make sense?
Oh, and the other thing, and you and I had spoken about this, actually, I had asked you a question before the meeting started about the disposal of the books. If we could take another look at what happens if a book meets the criteria and is banned. I know we have certain policies about what we do with school materials and how they are disposed of. So we could take a look at that.
I'm open to whatever, however we remove them from Madison County Public Schools. I'm happy to get them out of the schools, because I think that protects our children and protects parental rights. So, do you have a recommendation on?
No, not at this point. Maybe one of you guys do, but I think we have to be very careful about saying that we're going to donate them to another library.
So there is a surplus property
Right.
policy. So maybe we say, in accordance with policy, I don't know what it is right now, surplus property policy, we'll follow that. I'm looking for it.
And that's one thing that we do. We've never done this before, so it's hard to know, well, exactly what do you do with them. I just think we need to be careful by saying in the policy that we're going to donate them to the library.
That's good.
To another library.
That's a good point. I think we can just say something about surplus property or something, make it more clear.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try. I'll figure out what that is and make a suggestion on it.
So we're not ready to do anything.
It is DN, disposal of surplus items. DN.
So I guess, I think what I propose on the way ahead is I'll make these, and try to incorporate all these ideas, continue to receive them, and then can provide the updated draft to everybody to see what you think, and then based on how happy people are with that, vote on it whenever, the next month or in 2 months, or whatever that is. Does that sound good?
Board decision. Does that sound okay? Board? Okay. To be continued. So the next section, under business information, is exploring additional security measures, and I believe that was something that Mr. Sheeds was curious about, and so I'll let him take it from there.
Yes, so because we want the community to be involved, we wanted to put this on the meeting as an agenda item, and it would be good when people like to come down and bash us with their comments to stick around so that we can explain something to them. However, I don't know if y'all can, I know you can't read that. I'll read it for you. As part of the school safety response, Board Member Sheeds would like to discuss the idea of trained and proficient school staff having the opportunity and responsibility to carry concealed firearms on school property during school activity hours. He would like the division superintendent to survey school staff to see if there is considerable interest or willingness, and if so, survey the community to gather their feedback on the proposal. Currently, state law prohibits firearms on school property, except for law enforcement, but this law could change. But should this law change, Board Member Sheeds would like for the school board to know if this could be an option for Madison County Public Schools or not. I think that's pretty clear. I don't know. So my intent was to have Mrs. Graham send out a questionnaire survey to all school staff, and just to kind of see what their mindsets were, see how they felt about it. If we don't have teachers that would like to carry a firearm to protect children in school, I would never make them carry a firearm to protect children in school. Now, I will say the one lady got up and said that the most deadly thing that our children face is guns in this world, and that is absolutely not true. That was a straight-up lie. And abortion is, and I dare say there's most people that are against guns are for abortion. So keep that in mind as well.
So this is a topic that I don't know that the board is ready to commit to anything other than, I know that Superintendent Graham does surveys all the time. So in trying to find out just information, I mean, it is prohibited right now. So, you know, I think maybe, I mean, I don't know. What do you guys do or want to do? It's not my decision to make.
I'm not saying that Mrs. Graham needs to do as I'm asking her to do. If y'all would like her not to, I mean, it's okay. This isn't a requirement. This is just an idea. It's not my idea. Some of the parents, obviously, that aren't here tonight have brought it up to me because they've seen it done in other schools. And I know there was a lot of evidence-based data presented, but the issue is not the guns. The issue is the psychological state of the person using the gun, number one. So, and as Matt from Rochelle or wherever it was in Madison mentioned, you know, we do have a lot of people pushing the First Amendment and how important that is, and I agree completely, 100%. And the second one is right there with it when the first one doesn't work. So, but we have lots of people that they like one amendment but not the other, and it doesn't work that way. So.
I guess
I'm sorry. We do have some time, though, because right now we have time to get information because right now it is against state law. So, you know, it depends on when the time comes, when the right time is.
Yes. I don't like for things to happen and then be behind the eight ball and trying to get something figured out. So I like to have discussions ahead of time and figure it out. And I thought it would be a good idea to make sure the public was aware.
I guess I mean, Ms. Graham, could it be incorporated into one of your monthly surveys? And I think make it very clear that right now this is, this is not legal in Virginia. We're just kind of trying to explore options if this were to happen. Make that very clear so nobody thinks it's going to happen tomorrow, and ask that question. And that might, maybe there's no interest in it, and then that would give us some idea, or maybe there's a whole lot of interest, and that would give us some idea of options that is that doable? So maybe that's the direction we could take as a board.
Leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, once we get back that information, having the security team available and, we look at the data and making sure we are holistically, making sure security is utmost important.
Ready to move on?
I think Ms. Graham has the ability to send that out, incorporate that whenever you feel appropriate. Are you okay with that, Mr. Chief? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Under business information, ESSER funding update. And I believe that is Superintendent Graham and Tina Kropp, who is our Director of Finance.
Yes, we wanted to just provide an overview, a recap of our ESSER funding. We are required to have the public comment for our ESSER 3, public hearing for ESSER 3, but we just wanted to give an update for all the money that came from COVID, just to let you know where we are. We thought that might be helpful. So if you go to the first slide, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, those are our big pots of money. We have a remaining balance of a little over 1.9 million. That's 51% of the money that we were given in those two grants is remaining, which fits because we have been holding some of that to finish as we get to some of the slides. We're using ESSER 3 money to support a separate grant that we received, so we'll get to that in a second. But we just wanted to kind of recap by category how this funding has been spent. And as stated in public comment a little earlier, we've been very careful with the money as far as being very aware of the fact that it's going away. This was an extremely unusual gift that happened through the pandemic. We're not used to getting this kind of money. We know it's disappearing, and we kept that in mind the whole time. So we did try to put some part-time positions in place to support reading and math. That's where you see the student success coaches that were provided at the primary school, the elementary, and the middle school. If you look over in that separate category, the high school didn't get a student success coach. Instead, they got a graduation coach that kind of focuses on making sure that kids are getting everything they need to graduate on time. There was extensive summer curriculum work done in 2021. There's a math interventionist right now, grades 3 through 5. That is a position that we're trying to work on to put back into the budget if possible. This money, however, I should say, lasts through 2024. The positions we put in for ESSER 3 go through 2024. ESSER 2 has to be spent by September 2023. People positions that we need, we're trying to keep through 2024 as far as that goes. But I don't want to read all these slides to you. And again, these are the slides I showed you before on the money. So for the third category, the student attendance and engagement, that's where we've put in that behavior specialist. That is a position that's on our radar to keep. We have an additional elementary counselor, 3 assistant principals. During that time, we moved them to 12-month so they could provide more support in the summer for us for summer school because we've expanded our summer school. Virtual instruction. I know someone asked, and I'll bring you that number next time, for how many kids are still virtual. Very few for us. We did have an additional nurse last school year to help with all the things that we were having to do for COVID and all of those quarantines and things. We do not have that at this time. We did update. There's all the information we were receiving on student social, emotional, and wellness. We know that kids need playtime, learning to get along on the playground. That makes a big difference for kids. So we are using a lot of our funding to build a better playground at the primary school. So that's in the works now, and that will be more accessible. So that'll actually provide our families that have students with special needs access to a playground that they can go to out of school hours as well. We've updated the outdoor space at Waverly. And then if you haven't already, You really need to go behind the middle school and the high school to see the updated areas for both of those schools. Wetzel also used an additional grant to put in a little pond learning classroom, which is very nice. There is exercise equipment now behind Wetzel beside the track that families can use again outside school hours as well. And then the high school, they just finished painting outdoor basketball courts and 3 pickleball courts that are used, because that's something good to get high school kids outside and more involved. And again, that's available to our community if they want to go use that as well. But if you're going to help kids overcome the period of quarantine and stuff, we just felt that being outdoors and learning to get along was the way to do it. So that's how we use that funding. For staff well-being, we did the stipends and the bonuses. There's another bonus that was provided through the governor's last budget. Staff members are getting ready to receive that next Tuesday. So that'll be, it ranges from $250 to $1,000 depending on how much time you work in the division. We provided PD for them. We also partnered with Parks and Recs to provide yoga sessions if they would like that. And then we do have a lot of the maintenance projects, which I'll get to in a second. Next slide. This is ESSER 2. So this is kind of pulling the two apart. Out of that money for ESSER 2, that $1.9 million, there's $213,000 remaining in ESSER 2. All that funding is going into those salaries for our success coaches and graduation coaches now. Next slide. The unfinished learning grant. This was a separate grant that Ms. Kropp and I applied for that we've talked about before. It was originally a $664,000 grant, but it's provided after school all last school year and then this school year. It's been absolutely amazing. You heard from Ms. Dotson earlier, the agriculture class that met. They did the project that the little kids showed you that happened during this time period. If you were able to attend the play that our primary students put on last month, it was absolutely amazing. They did a little musical. They're getting ready to do another one, so you'll be able to see that in the winter sometime. There's been painting classes, sewing at Waverly. They bought some sewing machines because kids wanted to learn how to sew. So that's been awesome. Some kids that were interested in math are doing like a math club. There's individual tutoring and homework help at the middle school and the high school. The middle school and high school also have a tabletop games club that like 20-some high school kids, middle school kids have been attending that have been great for them. Exploring science classes, just so many opportunities and field trips, things like that. So it's been great. And Miss Sill with our food services, she's been able to start the after-school meal program. So kids are getting kind of like a little mini dinner, like they can get a sandwich and some yogurt. I think our football players were eating that as well. So it's been awesome. And our coordinator for that is Miss Artali. She works at the primary school, and she's done an excellent job making sure that she's recruited teachers, and we have over 300 kids that attend our after-school program. So that's awesome. And that's one of those things like that we need to figure out how to keep funding or doing something for. Right now we're doing, because we have the money, we're doing like awesome Cadillac version, but we can definitely still do an after-school program when that kind of money ends. We can be creative and more frugal. Next slide. So the actual ESSER 3, we have $1.7 million remaining. This is the one that must be spent by September 30th, 2024. It is funding the math interventionist position, additional school nurse, but again, we do not have that this year, and the technology support specialist. We use it for Virtual Virginia for any students that are still doing virtual instruction. We still have the money set aside for anything schools may need before 2024 with their instructional plans and any furniture they may need. We have the projects already underway, but the $577,000 is what's funding the playgrounds and outdoor classrooms. From the time period, and I'm looking at Ms. Kropp, the time period when we started planning for the primary school playground to when we were able to really get it going, it jumped $100,000 on us because of the cost of things right now. So that's been very frustrating with inflation right now. And then we're using ESSER 3 for the match for the special grant we received. which is also helping us get a new roof on the school board office. I guess over a year ago, we had that roof looked at, and we realized that it was very bad, and we were kind of at its end. And so this grant's enabling us to get a new roof and protect that building because it could be used for lots of things down the road. And that still leaves us $212,000 for additional capital improvement projects. Next slide. This is the grant for the school board office to turn that old gym cafeteria space into a better fitness facility. It does not take care of our need for a new field house, but it definitely gives us a big space where we can improve things so that all of our student athletes and our PE classes during the day can have access to fitness equipment. It was sad that we were using basically an auxiliary gym as storage. So this is turning it into something positive, and it's also enabling us to improve the roof in that building, because again, that building can be used for many years if we take care of it. So that was a $329,000 grant. So that's helping us get the new HVAC unit and installing the roof with the match that we'll do from ESSER 3 that I just talked about. Next slide. Our unfinished learning grant was, again, just a separate grant we applied for. It was a competitive grant, but we're able to buy any student materials and supplies that we need for students at home. So our primary and elementary schools have used this the most. It started out at $112,000, so we're down to $69,000, but they were able to send a lot of materials home with students at the beginning of the year. So we're trying not to spend that right away because we can use it through 2024, so we'll base that on student need as things arise. And the before and after school grant was, again, a separate competitive grant that we applied for. So we have $33,000 in that grant, and that's to do something special for families that normally wouldn't be able to travel with their children to see some of these things that we talk about, like in history classes. So we can go to art museums, we could take them to some of the, like Colonial Williamsburg, we can go to things like that and pay for the whole family to go, to give some families opportunities they may not have. So those ideas are being tossed around and planned. And that is a recap.
Mrs. Graham, thank you. And this is in reference to Ms. Davis' comments. Have any of the ESSER funds been spent on anything that we either will have to maintain that we wouldn't have before?
We've actually thought of that the other way around. We saw this funding as an opportunity to fix things that we were worried we were never going to be able to fix, like the roof at the school board office and things like that, and this athletic facility. Just things that have caused us great stress in knowing that it would be a lot of money for the county. So it's what can we do right now to fix things now that we have a little pot of money?
Okay, so safe for me to let Ms. Davis feel comfortable knowing that when the ESSER funds are gone, we won't have any lingering costs other than stuff that we would have had to repair, but we'll
Correct.
actually repair it further down the road because we've used the
Correct.
funds to repair it now.
Right. We're trying to correct things. And something like the primary school playground, that's like almost a $300,000 playground. That's something that a lot of times your PTOs fundraise for, and bless their hearts, we appreciate it. But these moms and dads fundraise for years, and by the time they're building a playground, their kid's like in 8th grade, and they started when their child was in like 1st grade. So we wanted to do something that could have impact, that people weren't fundraising, they could just, help our kids now.
Mrs. Davis, does that make you feel better? Okay.
And we also want to stress that when I say like the primary school playground and the stuff that now we have behind the middle and high school, we've tried to be really thoughtful in what can be used outside of the school day as well, because we wanted it to just enhance our community and give families opportunities for things to do in the county.
Any?
You did say that you had the success coaches and the graduation coaches that were being funded out of this.
They were.
But you have plans to incorporate that into our budget some way, or?
Not at the moment. They were hired as part-time employees, knowing that it was a grant-funded position. So at this time, they were hired knowing their position wouldn't be here when the funding is gone. If we could write it in, there's a long list. Some people already have my budget spreadsheet, and they've been adding a lot of things, and I'm looking at the high school principal because it's her. She's added so many things to the budget spreadsheet already. So it's a lot of things.
Are there any further questions that anyone has for Superintendent Grant?
I had a couple comments or comment and questions. First, I just want to commend. I was in Charlottesville the other day with my children. I think my 18-month-old and my 7-year-old, and we were trying to find a playground, and the school playgrounds were all locked up tight because after hours. And I just love how accessible playgrounds and the gyms are for community sports, and it's a credit, I think, to the relationship that you've built, and I think it's awesome. I hope we keep on doing that, because it's such a, it's so nice when during soccer practice, I think my 18-month-old, who's awful, terribly behaved, and we go to the playground, and it's so nice to go to the primary school playground, and she loves it and is happy, and so a lot of schools don't do that, and so I just commend the school division for doing that. It's really good for the community, I think. Grants, and I commend you for your initiative in getting the grants that helps to pay for the school board office roof, so the taxpayers don't have to do that. So thank you for working hard on getting grants. And then last, my question is that you said you had $200,000 left. Are there constraints or limits on how that's spent, or do we have some? Can you use that sort of any need?
We have to relate it to COVID some way, shape, or form. So like HVAC projects and things like that. So we've been kind of holding on to it when we think about it. When Ms. Croppa and I meet, we keep trying to, even though it was a larger pot, but now things are so expensive, it's down to $212,000. But we kind of are trying to hang on to that through next year, just in case we have something that goes down or something that needs repaired as far as HVAC goes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Graham. The very next thing on the agenda is the 2023-2024 budget planning, and that will be
Me again. Yeah, I had to look at that date a couple times to write 23, 24.
Yeah. So that will be Superintendent Graham and Mrs. Kropp, too.
So this is just very brief to give you a guide of what the next couple of months will look like as far as budget planning. We've already started with the spreadsheet that is out to principals. Tomorrow I meet with the superintendent's advisory. They are key on filling out that budget sheet. It goes to them first. They work with their teacher and staff colleagues. They put anything they can think of, and this is a wide open spreadsheet. Anything a teacher can think of that they do not have that they need goes on that budget spreadsheet, or they perceive they need, or that they really want but don't necessarily need, goes on that spreadsheet. And then the principals work with them to review that a bit, but that's one of the big things that we work off of when we start talking about the budget and trying to prioritize that and figure out exactly what it is that we want to put into the main budget. When I say we, I mean you all. So November through January is really about collecting that. Ms. Kropp answers a lot of questions for people, and she keeps up with that spreadsheet with me. And we start figuring out priorities. And another thing we do sometimes, we've asked people all along, especially with this ESSER funding, like, what do you need? What do you need? And then sometimes a staff member will put something on the spreadsheet. They were like, wait, we can get that now. So we try to weed out all that before it comes to you. And then we also wait for the governor to release his budget. So that'll be mid-December. And then we'll really know more of what we're dealing with the budget when we start talking with you all. So in January, there's a really great conference for superintendents and school finance officers that Ms. Kropp and I go to. That's actually part of an action item coming up tonight because it conflicts. It always conflicts for some reason with the school board meeting. So, but we really hope that you'll change the date for us because it's a good meeting to go to. Usually if the governor is not there, there's a representative, just people that can talk honestly with us about the budget and things that what to expect. And then we'll have our board meeting. I'll present budget goals at that meeting per conversations I've had with you all, and then based on the governor's budget and just things that Ms. Crop and I have talked about. We'll have teacher advisory in mid-January, and we review that budget sheet, and they talk me through any questions I may have, and Ms. Crop may have about things they put on that spreadsheet so we can understand it better. And then the following day, we all meet for a work session. So that way you guys can ask questions. And the spreadsheet will be live the whole time that it's being updated, so you'll be able to see, so you can come up with your questions. And then there's the capital conference that the VSBA offers. Some budget is discussed at that conference, but then the next day you're able to go meet your legislators and talk to them about things you may have concerns with. So, next slide. In February, that's when we always hope to hold the public hearing for the budget. And then in March, we meet with the Board of Supervisors at some time during their work session, so we can answer any questions they may have about our budget. And then generally, the budget is voted on at the March meeting. And then if something has come up and there's questions that people have, then we can have another work session in March. We can also add a work session in February if needed. So that's that.
Questions, anybody?
Mrs. Graham, wasn't the other big ticket item was the HVAC, or the, what do they call it, chiller at the Waverly? And because that's part of the heating and all system, is that, because that's a big expense?
Yes, it's a huge expense. So right now, how they think they can fix it, we would be able to cover with our ESSER funding.
Okay.
And that spreadsheet, is that available? When is that available to us?
I can make it available anytime because I just made it.
Oh, all right, awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
So after the explanation that have just had on the ESSER spending, we now will open the floor again to public comments on ESSER, if anyone has any public comments about that.
Mike Sharman from Novum again. So ESSER funds are supposed to help, was federal money coming in to help compensate for the educational deficit that we had during COVID. And we had seen last month I'm just using the Waverly, the middle schools rather, math data. And it listed out by color. White, 51% raw pass rates, Black 18%, Hispanic 40%. You know, if we ever have something that's systemic racism, it's right there. And I just refuse to believe that the general population of our Black kids are less intelligent or less capable or have less capacity than the general population of our white kids. I also don't think Madisonians are any less capable than the rest of the nation. And yet our testing is showing that. And yet where's the financial priorities? Playgrounds, capital improvements. But you lose a life, you lose a family, you lose a generation. You lose 3rd and 4th grade, you lose 6th and 7th grade, you lose 8th and 9th grade. You've lost that learning for that child for when they become a young adult and an adult, on and on and on. I would just seriously encourage you to reorder your priorities and also change the way you list the rates. Either have it all children or break it up by family composition, which actually, if you look at educational data, that's the greatest determinant of educational success. But let's not perpetuate systemic racism right here, which is what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments about ESSER funding? Seeing none, this closes the public hearing on ESSER funding. The next section on our agenda for tonight is business approval. So the very first item that we'd like to look at is policy BDB, having to do with special meetings. I believe we've had some information come in. So, Mr. Sheeds, this was your policy.
Yes, the school hired lawyer is looking at it. He has a couple questions about it, so I'm just going to make a motion to table this until next meeting.
Do I have a second for that?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that we table policy BDB, special meetings, until our next meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The next business approval we have, that we have been looking at for a couple of months and have had an opportunity to take a look at the draft policy concerning instructional materials with sexually explicit content. This policy is the one that has to do with instructional materials, not library books, instructional materials. And the expectation from our governor is that we will have something to him by, I believe it's January 1. I think we could go as long as December to approve it, but I think we've crafted something that we all think is pretty good and meets all the criteria that he asked us to take a look at. So I know you guys have seen this before because we have presented this material before. And we've had a discussion about it before as well. So could I have a motion to approve this policy concerning instructional materials with sexually explicit content?
Can I just say something real quick about it, just to kind of assure the public real quickly about just a couple of topics about it? I just want to note that this is the same, basically the same, very same policy, draft policy that we showed last month. It did go through the legal review, and there were some clarity of language and grammatical things that good catches and things. He was more clear than I was, but there's no change really. So I want to assure people that's gone through that legal review. Another thing I want to say is just this is really a preventative thing. You know, there's been I looked really hard at the English curriculum and talked to a lot of people about it. And I fully believe and trust that there's no such content in our schools, and so I commend the teachers and the leaders for that. So it's really a preventative thing. There is certainly out there, and I've seen it out there in other curriculums, and so it's really, we're trying to stop that from coming in. That's the whole purpose of this. And it does comply with the Virginia DOE model policy. You have to identify them, and we just make it stronger by saying we're going to remove that content and not allow it in. And that's the whole thrust of the policy. So I'd make a motion that we vote on this policy now to approve this policy.
May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the draft policy concerning the instructional materials with sexually explicit content. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The third item under business approval is a request that we move the January 9th, 2023 school board meeting to Thursday, January the 12th, 2023, in order for our superintendent and our director of finance to attend the VASS-VASBO conference in Richmond. And this is the one that they discuss some things about the budget and also educational hot topics. So they would ask that we move our meeting day. Is there any discussion about this, question about it? Okay. May I have a motion that we approve moving our January board meeting date to Thursday, January 12th, 2023? All those may I have a motion first?
I'll make a motion to approve to move the January 9th to the January 12th.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that we move our January regular meeting to Thursday, January 12th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. So we move on to reports from school board members, our student representative, and our superintendent. So, Ms. Collier, would you like to start?
To think about it for a second. I attended the PrEP board meeting. PrEP is Piedmont Regional Education Program. We had a good board meeting. Not a whole lot of action items, but more informational items around the programs and the Ivy Creek School that is that serves many of the counties around us. So, and I missed the walkthrough. Unfortunately, I wasn't here. So, that's all I have.
Mr. Sheets?
The CIP meeting, was where we talked about the Waverly HVAC system and then, of course, the school board office roof. And it's hard to believe that putting a roof on the school board office is almost $500,000. It's hard to believe. Put the bad stuff aside. We went the walk through the middle school and high school, and I really liked, I talked to Mrs. Wenham, and I really liked the fact that the tech class were building buildings and selling them. I mean, that's a win-win. That's awesome stuff. They're learning. It's good stuff. I really appreciate that. And I just want to echo again, I know Ms. Dodson's not here, but the stuff that they're doing there with the playground area, the planter boxes and stuff, I just think that's great. And I'm not kidding about having chickens and stuff there. I mean, there's like a homesteading movement, and it's getting cool again. Not cool in temperature, but cool as in it's fun. And kids are learning where their food comes from, and I think it's good all the way around, and I want to support that as much as possible.
Mr. Wingate?
Thank you. Appreciate the walkthrough of the middle school and high school. Thank you for that opportunity, and commend you, Ms. Wenham, for the awesome basketball courts and stuff. It's beautiful back there, and it's really a nice job. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for making it open to the public too, which is so great after hours. It's so nice for the community. And I did also have a chance to walk through the locker room. I talked to the superintendent and Ms. Wenham about it. I do hope we're able to find some money and et cetera, to help the football locker room down on the football field. It's I played there almost 30 years ago, and it hasn't changed one bit. And so it certainly could use some upgrading. So I hope we can find some way to do that. And one idea is using our CTE folks to build lockers or things like that. It's a great experience for them. So I hope we do that. And I did miss the gifted and talented thing due to work, but I reviewed the slide out, and I think it's awesome that we are focused on trying to challenge everybody. So oftentimes I think we focus on the people who need the most help, and it's awesome, we should. But it's also good to challenge everybody, and so I think we're doing that through that program, and so I think that's good, and commend everybody for doing that. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Well, Mr. Wingate is wrong. The locker rooms are not the same. The JV side doesn't even have lockers. All their stuff is in piles on the floor. So yeah, we're working together to come up with plans for that. And although I won't be able to see the end of that, I do want to congratulate Mr. Martz on his election to the seat here. And as a Mountaineer, there's something you never kind of get over. I'm going to still be supporting Madison Public Schools. I have way too much invested in it with 4 more kids that still have to make it through. And I just wanted to congratulate Greg. And I did vote for your meeting to change in January. I hope that was good. But it is nice to know that, that I feel safe with Greg taking over. He's going to do an amazing job, and I just wish him the best of luck.
Thank you. Mr. Reese?
There we go. Every time. First of all, I wanted to thank the community for your support of the football team. Our season ended last week, and seeing everybody at, whether it's the home games or the away games, turning up and showing support, that really made not only the players feel good, but the coaches too. I want to say that we all appreciate that. Thank you all for showing up. Wednesday is the Virginia School Board Association's Student Representative Conference, so I'll be attending that on Wednesday. And the Powder Puff football game is on Friday, so I encourage you all to show up and support our students. Go Seniors. But funds for that go to prom, so I encourage you all to show up and come support. Other than that, I don't think there are any major events going on in the near future, but that's what we got going on for now. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess I can say something about that too. Thursday night, I got my acceptance letter to the Virginia Military Institute. So, thank you. So, I sent in some scholarship stuff for that, and hopefully I will get some stuff back from them soon. So, sorry? No problem. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations. That's quite an honor to go there, and I'm sure you'll represent Madison extremely well. And I'll go ahead and then we'll come to the superintendent last. Save the most important for last. I just wanted to say as well, I was at the walkthrough in the high school and the middle school. And in the middle school, I was paired with Mr. Sheeds, and we had the opportunity to walk around and look in different classrooms. And the one classroom that I don't know that was necessarily on the schedule, but it was one that we just kind of wandered into. And it was the class that had our disabled children in it. And just walking in there and seeing the hard work that the teachers are putting into these students, and also their use of technology and how they're using that to communicate with something that we don't get the opportunity to see. So I just wanted to mention that was not necessarily an eye-opener, but sometimes a group of children that don't get as much attention. And there are other opportunities. If you, is it Kathy Mayford? Mayford? Is that it? Medford? I know there's opportunities for different teams of students in with the different schools that have competition. They have basketball games, and then they have field days and those kinds of things as well. So it did my heart good to see how much care and love and education that these kids were receiving from our wonderful teachers. Did you want to add to that?
I just want to echo that, and I met Charlie. And
Oh, yeah,
Charlie was
Charlie.
talking to me with his computer, and I was asking questions, and he was answering through the computer, and it touched my heart.
So Charlie met Charlie, and that was quite an experience, I think, for all of us. Superintendent Graham?
I actually did not have anything else to add tonight.